Hey guys, this is May, and today we'll be talking about a technique in astrology that we don't always talk about, which is date selection, or what we call elections. So elections are not exactly your general elections or your presidential elections, but rather it's the electing or selecting the best date for things like incorporating a company, getting married. If you're launching a book and you're looking for a good date, that's what we're looking for. So today we'll be looking at some of these commonly asked questions about elections. So you know what? Here goes. Now, most of the time when you go to a traditional astrologer, and of course this isn't limited to Chinese astrologers, I believe you have this with Indian astrologers and several other types of astrology as well. There's this concept of picking the best date. So at least for myself, because I'm ethnic Chinese and I'm more familiar with the Chinese kind, which is the idea is that, let's just say for a wedding, if you wanted to pick a good date, the idea is auspicious and inauspicious, or lucky or unlucky. Now, in most cases, when a date is considered lucky, then it's kind of like lucky for everyone. So that means if you got married on that day, it's a lucky day. If someone else got married on that day, it's still a lucky day. So in that sense, it's possibly one of the reasons why you see there are certain dates where lots of couples get married there. And then there are some dates where for whatever reason people are not interested in it because the fortune teller said it was bad. Now, this is very different from the Western philosophy, because the idea that that a date is just lucky for everyone, not quite the Western way. Rather, we are looking for the date that is right specifically for you. Now, what do I mean by that? Because let's just say if somebody was selecting a wedding date, rather than looking for luck or no luck, it's more like, what is it that you wanted to emphasize on your wedding date? For example, some couples want to have lots and lots of children, and some couples don't want children. So in that sense, it could be that there are couples who want to emphasize dates or timings that would make them more fertile, while others would rather not, you know? And then there are also people who, there are couples who work together, and there are couples who have completely separate careers. So if you work together, quite often people want to know if, do we not just maintain a personal relationship, but we want to make sure that we are able to keep that work-life balance very clear between us, because we kind of have two different types of lives together. The same thing occurs for businesses. I think it's of course we want to assume that most businesses want to have like profit. I think that is pretty much like a given, right? But I think we also realize that some businesses want to go a lot further. Like if they want to do social enterprise, for example, then they might actually want dates or timings that will facilitate that, while other companies may not care. When we talk about precision, I think some of you are aware that the Western natal chart, the birth chart, is specific to the minute. So I think it's very natural for people to ask, like, must I incorporate at like 2:25 p.m. or must I sign my ROM cert, my registry of marriage cert, exactly at 3:48 p.m.? No, it's not going to be like that. So in general, what you get is a range of timing. So in most cases, I would say, in the ones that I've done so far, I always give at least a 15-minute range. And in some cases, we could even have up to a 2-hour range. So it really depends. But I think with regard to the precision of the dates, what's most important is that we have to be very reasonable also. Like, let me give you an example. If you're going to get married and what we're electing is the timing for signing of the marriage certificate, we have to be quite clear that sometimes the best time could be 3 a.m. in the morning, during which no registrar is going to show up and facilitate your wedding. So in terms of being reasonable, most people want daytime hours. Like, they wouldn't mind 1 p.m, they may not mind 7:30 p.m, but they certainly do not want 4 a.m. So in terms of being able to select the timing, I think the practical factors, and I think also practicality also with regards to the range of dates, because I'm pretty sure most people don't want to wait 5 years for a wedding date. So most of the time people will give me a reasonable range, like I want to get married between, say, February to May. So we could be looking at, say, a 3 or 3.5 month range. So that would be about, say, just under 100 days. So then what an astrologer would do is, based on these reasonable 100 days, that I'm looking for the time period that would best match the kind of marriage or the kind of business that you're looking for. Now, beyond the logistical questions, what is even more important is the second half of the interview, where I want to know more about their purpose and the objective of doing the election. Now, one of the differences, especially compared to the more traditional way of doing things, is that most people think that I just want to have a good date. Like, as long as, if it's a company, as long as we're profitable, then okay lah. Or if it's a marriage, then they just want to be harmonious, or they just want to be happy together. And I would say for the most part, an astrologer would never ever give you a time for incorporation that was designed for you to lose money. I don't think that makes sense. And I don't think a self-respecting astrologer will give you a wedding date that was designed to ruin your relationship. So I would say those things are a given, but you want to look into the nuances of what people actually expect. In marriages, for example, some people want to have lots of kids and some people don't want to have kids at all. So this means that by understanding what my clients are looking for, I could be electing for fertility. And in some cases, I've got couples who specifically tell me we don't want children. So I may not block it completely, but definitely I do want to reduce the incidence or the chances that they might get an accident and get pregnant. And I think even when it comes to business, while most businesses want to be profitable, I've had a few cases where people tell me like, we are a social enterprise and we want to make sure that, say we work with prisoners, for example, one of our objectives is to get the people we work with to have more acceptance in society. So beyond profit, there's a social outcome that they want, and I'll make sure that I elect for acceptance of prisoners. So in that sense, you'll find that each person will say very different things to me during this interview process. And it really helps the astrologer to know what dates to eliminate and which dates will become closer to meet your requirement. Well, some of the other common other dates besides wedding dates are like incorporation dates. I've done cases of book launches is another possibility. In some cases, I have elected very important investments, but I would say by and large, the most meaningful elections are for wedding dates and for incorporations. Because I think one good way to think about an election is like a birth date of an important thing that happens in your life. Now, if you think about most events, a book launch, I mean, unless you're like J.K. Rowling, right? I mean, a book isn't necessarily the number one thing in your life, but it's easy for a business or a marriage to be the number one thing in your life. And when we think about the signing of a marriage certificate, it's the moment that a marriage is born. So in a sense, it's sort of selecting the birth of a marriage or selecting the birth of a company. One thing I never do elections for, and this is a personal choice, is that I don't elect for babies' births. So that means if parents show up and say, well, we've got a range of maybe a couple of weeks, and the doctor can induce the birth, we can make sure the baby is born on this specific date and time. I don't do those, and it's not about the fee, it's just a personal choice. My feel is that a baby is a soul, and the soul chooses what time it wants to make an appearance on the world, because I believe that humans choose their own birth time. So I don't elect for births. See, I think the common misconception about election is that if you pick a good date, then you'll be successful, whether in your marriage or in your business. And I would like to really emphasize that if two people have an abusive relationship with each other, I could pick the best date available and it doesn't make a bad marriage good. Similarly with a business, if there isn't a good plan, picking a good date doesn't actually make a lousy business successful. But what is important here, well, I suppose what I'm trying to say here is that it's not about finding a lucky date. And sometimes when people want to just find a lucky date by itself, it's a bit like shirking the responsibility for making things successful. Then the question is then, why do an election? Now, in my experience, the value of the election is not in receiving the date from the astrologer, but rather it's in the interview that I do with my clients. So it's not usually a short interview. I actually spend at least half an hour with the client just to get a sense of the why and the how. I mean, if I'm doing something with a business owner, and very often they just tell me, just give me a date that I will be profitable. And I could, or I could say, well, I mean, are there concerns? Are there doubts in your mind about why you might not be successful? So that's when people share a lot of details. Like they may say things like, well, I'm experienced, but my business partner is inexperienced. So I'm kind of concerned that my business partner may not be ready for the ruggedness that they need in order to succeed in the business. So now I know that there's a little bit of a mismatch potentially of expectations between business partners, and that gives me the chance to sort of like mention that a bit. So now we know that the new business partner has a learning curve, and that means when I'm electing for patience, for example, that the experienced business owner will allow the other person to learn the ropes as they go along and not expect them to be like an Amazon right from the start. So you can see it's very small nuances like this that, yes, I can put it into the birth time of the company, but what's even more important is that I facilitate a discussion between business owners that it forces them to really think about what you want. Now, it's very interesting that in marriages especially, because for wedding dates, I never ever see one person, I need to see both of them. And what's very interesting is that you would think that once people agree to be married, that they'll be aligned on everything. Well, let me tell you, that's not the case. It's quite common. Well, in an exaggerated case, you could have one person saying that, well, I'd like my marriage to be all about investments. I want us to make lots and lots of money. And the other party might say, really? Really? That's the purpose of our marriage? Now, this is, sometimes it's a good basis for me to come in and say, well, it looks like there is potentially a mismatch of expectations, but it means that when it's facilitated, they can come to a bit of a compromise that what really is important to both of them. So in fact, I remember this one incident. I have a fantastic couple. Their name is Sing Hong and Ellen. And I remember that when they first came to me, they've been together for more than 10 years. So there is no question that this couple already knows each other well. They knew what they were signing up for. So in fact, then I asked them, besides happiness and harmony, and they are in a business together, so they want to work together, that's cool. And are there any challenges? So that's when they were very kind to open up and tell me that sometimes they have arguments that perhaps are a lot louder than they expect them to be. And also sometimes there is this feeling of maybe my partner doesn't respect me or they're not listening to my ideas. So having that conversation also meant that, well, I promised them that I could give them a date that would facilitate more open communication, that they would spend more time listening and respecting each other. But it also meant that they became very clear that this was one of the traits of their relationship that they were not 100% happy with. But it also meant that at that moment, something magical happened, which was that when they looked at each other and they felt that if we are going to ask May to elect our wedding date, and if we are going to go ahead with this wedding, we've now made a powerful decision that in this marriage, I choose to pay attention to my partner and to respect what my partner's wishes. Because I know if I don't do so, I'm going to have a very argumentative marriage. So you can hear from Ellen and Sing Hong about their experiences of doing this election.
Yes. We did this date election for our marriage with May, and then during that election, May also did our PA for us, and she also let us see when both of us are together, what's our personality like, and how we complement each other also, and how we will have conflict, the area that we will have conflict. After that session, I also learned to appreciate the difference between us. I learned that we both are different, and I cannot expect him to live the life like me. I cannot expect him to be the person that I want him to be. I started to accept him as the person he is.
The session is very quite intense, and I think the outcome that I get is I get confidence and clarity, because during the session May actually showed, like, what is my strength, what is my weaknesses, and also highlight to me what is Sing Hong's strength and her weaknesses. So, and also together, what is our, like what Sing Hong said, a conflict, and how we can complement each other. So with that knowledge in mind, right? As a man, I can find the footing. Hey, this is my value. This is where I can really contribute, and this is where I need to watch out. Where some of the conflicts that may arise, and also this is when conflicts arise. This is how we can potentially like resolve, mitigate, stuff like that. So I think after that session itself, I'm really confident that let's do it. And Yeah, and of course, reading the charts, planning the dates ahead, that choosing the dates that is the most suitable ones, depending on what we want out of our marriage.
Well, obviously, if I'm going to elect a date and a time for starting something, the number one criteria is that you must be ready to start something. So that means if I'm going to elect a wedding date, the assumption then would be that you are absolutely ready to commit yourself to a relationship. Now, there have been times where, in the case of an incorporation, there have been several occasions where it's easy to get very excited about a business, and then you come to May, and then May gives you a fantastic date for starting your business or all your dreams and hopes. And sometimes there are cases where the business owner isn't ready to start, isn't ready to commit to a business, and then doing an incorporation doesn't really help you out very much over there. The second is also that that when a person is serious and ready, the usual thing is, as humans, we always have a bit of doubt. We need to know, if you start a business, it is not true that a person doesn't have fear or doubt. And that means being able to articulate to the astrologer what it is that is on your mind would really, really help. Okay, so for the people who are clear about these things and their objectives, an election is very easy, it's very painless, and it also means that you get the assurance that I've given you the best kind of time to facilitate what you have in your mind, what you visualize in your mind to make it a reality. And I think what is really like not suitable is like, I think, going back to what I said earlier, if your expectation is that having a good date means that I don't have to work hard for my business, or that even my very shitty, abusive partner is suddenly going to become the most romantic partner in the world, I think then potentially we are not being realistic about what we can get out of an election. So I hope you enjoyed hearing about elections. It certainly is a very interesting technique that we use in astrology that you don't often get heard about. But although many of you might be interested to explore something like that, now what I think is even more powerful than doing an election is actually getting clear about your objectives for starting a business, or if you're about to commit to a very special relationship in your life, and that if you were feeling that there were doubts and that there were things you were not sure about, what is even more powerful thing that you can do in your life is to get clear about that. So as you have heard from my clients Ellen and Sing Hong, the value that they got out of the election was not the date that they received, but rather the insight that they had about their behaviors and some of the objectives, even if they have different objectives in some areas of their life. So if you like to use astrology to really get to know about what your life is about and how you can contribute, how you can have the bigger, more extraordinary life, do get in touch with us, and there are lots of programs that you can explore for your self-development purposes. So until the next video, I will see you guys.